Welcome back to another episode of The Mindful Hunter. I'm your host as always, Jay Nichol. And today we are here to discuss a bino clamp from Aziak Equipment. All right, guys, so I recorded that video and I completely forgot that I had a giveaway. So here's the deal. Stay tuned until the end of the video and I will tell you how you can win one of these bino clamps. Now, before we can dig into today's review, I need to give you a note from our sponsors. Now, that sponsor is me, because as you know, I'm pretty vehemently opposed to sponsorship in the outdoor industry, at least to the point where it affects people's bias and kind of adversely incentivizes them to share inappropriate information or fudge the truth or make products seem better than they are so that you'll use their shoddy discount codes and all the rest of it. But I have built an online platform called Mindful Reviews. That's the sponsor for this video. That's the sponsor for all the videos. If you like what I do and you want to support what I do and you find value in what I do, the best way to help me do more of it is to join Mindful Reviews. So here's the deal. It is a membership-based site. You can choose monthly, annual, or lifetime. We have 160 members as of today, which is outstanding. We've only been running for about 6 months. It's a really great community. As soon as you belong to the community, you can chat in the forums, you can ask questions. There's lots of super experienced people there willing to help everybody out with new gear purchases. On top of that, you have complete access to me and anything that I can help you out with. Also, you get to help choose which products I review and which elements of those products I look at when I start putting my reviews together. In addition to that, about once a month, I have a big raffle and I'll review something really large. Like I just finished a spotting scope review and I raffled off a Swarovski ATX 85mm spotting scope. Guy bought a $40 ticket and he won a $5,000 spotting scope. I got a couple tents that are going up for raffle in about a week and a half, 2 weeks from the release date of this video. And in addition to that, if you are a lifetime member, I have a giveaway once a month. I just gave away a GoPro Hero 11 Black last month, and I'm giving away a tripod panhead combo at the end of this month. So that will be a Wiser Precision Nighthawk PH170 panhead paired with a slick 634 tripod. That was the setup I used primarily this last year. I really liked it. Super light, relatively durable, really reliable. I enjoyed it a lot. So I put that package together and I'm going to give it away to one of the lifetime members. So if you like what I do and you want to support it, or if you want to have a voice in the products that I review next, please head on over to mindful-reviews.com, join up and engage with the community. Now, before I get into reviewing this bino clamp, I want to tell you what I used to use and why I switched. So this is the Outdoorsman's kind of stud adapter. Now, I run Swarovski NL Pures, and in order to run this post on these binoculars, you have to get this aftermarket stud installed directly from Outdoorsman's. Now, Swarovski themselves don't say that the warranty stays intact, but Outdoorsman's gives you their word that if anything ever happens to your binos, they will make sure that this did not impact the eligibility of the warranty. So it's one of those things that's like, I don't want to say sketchy, but it's like you're definitely modifying a multi-$1,000 piece of equipment outside of the spec of what it was initially designed for. So that was part of my hesitation at first, but my entire glassing system was on Outdoorsman's. Now, I do a lot of filming, so what was really important to me was that I had interchangeability between all my devices, all my mounts, and all my tripods. So I primarily have 3 devices that need to go on a tripod. I have my big camera, my Sony A1, I have my binoculars, and I have my spotting scope. So what I had to do previously was have Outdoorsman's adapters on all of those things. For my camera, I ran 2 adapters on the base of the camera. One is a cotton carrier adapter, so I could hold it on my shoulder harness rig and then take it off of there and mount it onto the tripod so it was interchangeable. And then I had to put an outdoorsman's adapter on the bottom of my spotting scope and another outdoorsman's adapter, this post, on my bino. So here is a look at the outdoorsman's adapter plate. So this is what was on the bottom of most of my devices. Also, here's a quick look at the outdoorsman's quick release adapter. So this can be mounted upon any device that has a similar thread bolt pattern. That way you can use one of these adapters on this quick release, or you can use this on this. So essentially, if you had a tripod pan head that was not outdoorsman's compatible, like the Sea-Ray VA5, you would have to mount one of these quick release adapters on top of that in order to use this post on this quick release adapter. Now, I like outdoorsman's. I think their stuff is fantastic. I think their build quality is phenomenal. The one thing I'm gonna, complain or note is that it's super chunky. Like when you stick this like 3/4 of an inch thick thing on the bottom of your spotting scope and it already has another post adapter there, it really significantly increases the bottom of the size of that. And then when you have to put something like this on top of your tripod, and it has a fairly small surface area, so it tends to come loose. And then you put something like this, in addition on top of it. I mean, it's not out of the, reasonable to say you're adding like a solid 2 inches to the top or bottom of whatever it is you're putting stuff on. And then I kind of had to have this mishmash of like adapters and quick release plates and all this other stuff so that I could basically take my 3 main devices and move between different tripods, different mounts, shoulder holsters, and all the rest. So at the beginning of the year, I said to myself, I need to readjust my system. Like, this isn't working for me. Plus, now that the reviews are so much more popular and I'm covering so much more gear, I need to look at different adapting systems, different tripods, different pan heads, different devices that have or don't have access to the outdoorsman's system. 2-3 years ago, when it was just the same 3 devices day in, day out on the same tripod day in, day out, once you're set up, it was pretty easy to just stay set up. But once I had to keep testing new gear all the time, I was like, this just isn't working for anymore. So obviously, or maybe not so obviously, the step is to go ARCA Swiss. Now, ARCA Swiss, I've talked about this before on other reviews and podcasts. It's kind of a loosely defined standard that basically describes the shape of this adapter on the back of the Aziak Bino Clamp. Another way to think about it is the top of this pan head here is ARCA Swiss compatible. Essentially, it's a basic flanged adapter that can go on the bottom of anything. It's very short, it's very compact, it adds very little depth to whatever you're putting it on. The vast majority of tripods now, including the Sea-Ray VA5, the Wiser, the Tricer, all the slick pan heads, almost any pan head by default will accept one of these ARCA Swiss plates. So it makes it way easier to kind of transition back and forth between all your gear. So if you're at that point where you're building an optics system, I would recommend building it into the ARCA Swiss standard. Another really big reason here is if you go buy a new Swaro ATX, the actual mounting plate on the bottom of that spotting scope is already ARCA Swiss. You don't need to put an adapter plate on it. You don't need to do anything to it. You can literally just take that spotting scope and slide it right into an ARCA Swiss compatible pan head. So that's a fairly large digression, but I think it was important to note because there are other mounting systems as well. I know RRS has the cinch. I think Swaro and Leica have another Bino Clamp as well with like a rubberized strap that you kind of mount this plate to your tripod and then pull the strap over. Here's a deal breaker for me. I don't want one-off mounting systems that basically hardwire one piece of gear into one tripod. I need to be able to move cameras, spotting scopes, and binos back and forth between all my devices. So I'm not particularly interested in something like the cinch or these other rubberized band contraptions, because sure, they solve the problem for my binoculars, but then what about when I want to mount my camera? Or what about when I want to put my spotting scope? Then I've got to take this big clunky thing off, put something else on. It's kind of a nightmare. So when I started looking around for ARCA Swiss compatible binocular mounts, that was when Aziak came onto my radar. And when you first look at the Aziak mount, you are almost shocked by its simplicity. It is essentially just a flat ring with an ARCA Swiss compatible base plate on the bottom that you mount with a screw to tighten. And I'll get into how you actually put it on the binoculars in a minute. But it's so hyper basic that when you look at it first, you're like, A, why didn't I think of this? Or why didn't somebody else think of this like a really long time ago? Because look at the trouble that I went to. I think I had to pay $100 to get this installed. It puts this big post on here, which while it is functional and it does what it's supposed to, there are some severe drawbacks. It adds a significant amount of depth to your bino harness, so you can kind of feel it poking into your chest. Otherwise, you got to take it on and off every time you want to use it, and then you risk losing it. It doesn't stay locked. Now, outdoorsmen will tell you that this is a self-leveling feature, and it's something that they wanted in there on purpose. I will tell you from years of using this, it's kind of annoying. Because you'll go to look at it and your binos will like cant to one side, and then you got to pull them back and then they cant to one side. And it's like, I really wish you had the ability to just lock this down, because when I mount my binoculars to my tripod, I want them to stay exactly where I put them. And I can always level the pan head myself. That's one of the things that I like about the Aziak clamp, is that once you lock it into the pan head, there is very little movement whatsoever. So again, the ease of mounting, the kind of lack of any type of disruptive or destructive kind of things you got to do, there is essentially zero impact from mounting this to your binos. Now, I did talk to the lead engineer, and because I was a little curious about, is it possible that this would get so tight that it would damage the tube? And he said in his early testing, he moved to components that were small enough that you couldn't physically apply enough pressure to damage the tube. You'll notice in the little video that I'm going to show where I mount this, you're using a very small Allen wrench, and you would essentially either strip this bolt or break this component over here, in my opinion, before you would apply enough force to physically damage this tube. And you don't have to have it crazy tight. Like, there's a rubberized coating on the binoculars. There's a rubberized coating on the bino clamp itself. Like, these things want to stick. It's not moving anywhere. The one note I will make is because I did have an earlier iteration of the bino clamp, and it was a little bit thinner, and it was made out of kind of a more, I don't want to say slippery material, but like a harder plastic. And he seems to have moved to something with a little more grip and a little wider. So there's a little more surface area, so it bites quicker. So I'm not particularly concerned about this damaging my binoculars. Certainly not any more than I was about installing this stud that Swarovski themselves doesn't approve of with their warranty package. Now, let's talk a little bit about my personal experience with the bino clamp. So I used this on my most recent 2 hunts. So back in January and February, I did 2 solo winter mountain goat hunts. One was about 12 days long and the other one was about 8 days long. So I have about 20 field days with this bino clamp. Obviously, being a mountain goat hunt, I was glassing extensively every day. I used this on my tripod every day. It got down to bitterly cold temps on both trips. I was into minus 25 Celsius, minus 10 Fahrenheit regularly on both those trips. The second trip was the colder of the two for sure. And from a practicality and use perspective, I mean, I don't want to make it seem like this review is overly simple, but after having used the Outdoorsman's for so many years, and after noting that I need something that's interchangeable, I simply can't come up with why I would use anything else but this. It's cheap, it's easy, it doesn't damage your binoculars. I like the way that it mounts to the tripod itself. Now, one thing to note, and this is true with almost all binocular mounts, you're gonna wanna have your handle inverted to the way that you look at the binos. Typically, when I have my spotting scope on, I would have the handle of the tripod faced in the same direction as I was looking. But obviously, you're not gonna be able to get your face close enough because your face is gonna come into contact with the handle of the pan head. So you stick the handle out the other way, and it actually becomes a very comfortable glassing process because you basically grab the handle in front of your binos and then kind of move them around wherever you want. I didn't find that there was any shaking issues, slippage issues. It was quick and easy to mount. It stayed mounted once I mounted it. I mean, yeah, I really don't know how much there is to say about this particular bino clamp. It is 100% my go-to choice moving forward. So before we talk about the mounting procedure, I want to talk about the product selection feature. So basically, depending on what optic you run, one of these rings is going to fit your optic. Now, the nice thing is each of these rings fits anywhere from like 10 to 20 different optics. So maybe even if you have a couple of different ones, the same ring might fit. But basically, he's got a bunch of different sizes. You go on the website, you look up your particular optic, it will tell you what size to order, and then you're good to go. Now, once you have the right optic selected, you'll notice that it comes with a couple of spare pieces. The different size bolts are for different size optic tubes, and then it comes with a spare nut as well. So when you go to install this, you simply open up the ring, slide it to the most reasonable place on your binos. With the NL Pures, it's pretty easy because they are actually only purely cylindrical back about 2 to 2.5 inches. And then they kind of get oblong. So it becomes very obvious that you kind of want it on that front portion of the binocular. So you put it there, you put the little nut inside the sleeve on the one side, you thread your bolt through, you put it in, and then using the supplied Allen wrench, you just tighten it down finger tight. I would go less tight than more tight. It's not something you need to cork down at all. And then that is literally it. You are now installed. Now, someone asked me when I was preparing for this review if I was worried that it took a proprietary tool. I guess they thought that it wasn't just a regular Allen key, and it is just a regular Allen key. It's a particularly small Allen key, but an Allen key nonetheless. One thing that never leaves my possibles pouch is a Leatherman Skeletool. And in that Leatherman Skeletool, I have one bit pack that has multiple Allen keys, multiple screwdriver head bits, basically anything I could need to fix my bow, my gun, my camera, or any other device that requires a hand tool to disassemble or reassemble. I've gone through, noted all the different sizes, and I have the bits required in this one little bit pack that's attached to my Skeletool. And I do have one of these smaller Allen keys. So for me, it's not an issue. If this came loose or if I needed to retighten it, I would have the appropriate Allen key. Now, if something destructive happened and this bolt sheared off, I mean, yeah, fair enough. There's really nothing you can do about that. But I have a hard time seeing how that would occur and what would make that occur. Like, that would be a pretty rare circumstance in my opinion. Rydell, the guy who is behind Aziak, seems to be a very thoughtful engineer. And I feel pretty confident. These did not just come out yesterday. These have been out for a significant amount of time. I'm a little behind the curve because I was so locked into the outdoorsman system. I should have moved to this probably a couple years ago. But I feel that there's been extensive field testing done with these. And if something was going to fall apart by now, it would have. Now, before I finish up the review, I want to make a couple of notes because Aziak makes a couple other cool products that I thought were really interesting. So a lot of you run a Sea Ray VA5 fluid panhead. It's one of my favorite panheads. It's probably the best budget panhead on the market today. I think Wiser and Tracer are probably starting to take a bite out of that market because they're so small, so light, and especially with the Tracer, they've really brought down the pricing. But if you want to shave some weight off of your VA5, you can replace the metal handle that comes with it with this carbon fiber handle that Aziak equipment makes. It's super easy. It shaves a significant amount of weight off the panhead. This itself, all in, weighs 0.5 ounces. So I thought this was super cool. Great little gadget. And the Bino clamps are so cheap anyways. When you're on their site, you're like, I might as well buy some other stuff. That's probably my online shopping issue, but I thought this was super cool. And then one other piece I thought was really handy. They all have the same kind of mounting device on the back. And it essentially allows you to mount this to the back of your Garmin and then mount this to either a horizontal or a vertical strap of webbing on your backpack. So I think the most common use for this would be to mount it on your shoulder strap. And so now you can literally, like, it's got this little pressure clip. You could hard mount this to the webbing on your shoulder strap. You could click your inReach in. It's always here. You've always got access to it. This is really intriguing to me for winter hunts, especially when you're in deeper snow country. If AVI concerns are an issue at all, being able to reach your inReach when mobility is limited, I think is a really good idea. It's also just more convenient to check messages and stuff. I know most people link it with Bluetooth to their phone, but having lost a phone previously on a hunt, I think anything that gives you more stability and reliability when it comes to taking care of your gear, I'm all about. So the other reason I wanted to call this out is this, like, I'm just gonna be honest, this is the shit I love. Small company, one guy with an idea, doesn't have a huge marketing budget, isn't relying on a bunch of influencers running around peddling his shit for discount codes. Like, he had a cool idea, he made some cool gear, and clearly every time he thinks of something or runs into a problem in the industry, he's like, hey, maybe I can come up with something cool that other people will find useful as well. And it's like, this was the type of shit that was important to me when I started Mindful Hunter and Mindful Reviews. Like, I think people like this and companies like this is what I want to stand behind and help support. Now, ultimately though, the reason I want to stand behind it and help support it is that the merits of the product itself. Like, I've used it, it's good, I can vouch for it, give it my word, and I don't mind recommending it to people. But I think it's also beneficial that, he's clearly a very, ingenious, inventive kind of guy. So I just wanted to give a shout out to these other products while we were on the topic of Aziak equipment. Because if you're making an order already, you might as well chuck in another couple pieces and have some other cool stuff for your kit. So before we close this out, I did post a Q&A up on my Instagram and letting people know I was doing this review and just wanted to tell them, if there's any specific questions you have, let me know. So somebody asked, is there any wiggle or vibration when locked into ARCA Swiss head or good and solid? I would say it's hyper good and solid. Now, what I would note is that as people push this ultralight boundary, the combination of your pan head and your tripod is going to be more responsible for like wind shake, than the actual mounting adapter itself. I noticed that when I went as ultralight as the tracer paired with a slick 634, I really couldn't use my 95 millimeter spotting scope at any more than like sitting height. If I started to extend those legs and any higher than my hips, it was just too much vibration, even in really low wind. And that had nothing to do with the quality of the gear, only that it's so light. This is one of the reasons I always ran an Outdoorsman's aluminum tripod, is that they're much more stable, but you pay for that with the weight penalty. But I don't think there's any additional vibration brought in here. Somebody else says, can you keep it in your binos while not in use? This is what I love the most. The Outdoorsman's thing was kind of a pain in the butt because you're taking it on, taking it off. Maybe you put it in your thing, depending on the bino harness. This didn't fit very well in my marsupial bino harness at all. In my Alaskan guide creations, it fits significantly better, but it's just a roomier bino harness. This thing, you're not even gonna recognize that it's on there. You're just gonna set it and forget it. So somebody asks, is there a major difference in ease of use having the tripod connection on the binocular barrel versus in the center? I would say it takes a little bit of getting used to, simply because you're off center. But then once you get used to it, it's like literally 5 minutes and you're totally fine. In fact, I think in some ways it's more comfortable because it moves your face back from the tripod pan head itself, and you don't feel so kind of compressed up against your gear. And in some ways, I think you can get more comfortable. Rigidity and durability, it's pretty flexible and it looks to be hyper durable. And I don't think it's gonna go through a whole lot of torque or tension being where it is and how it mounts. Now, I will say one guy reached out who is using a ball tripod head, and he wasn't the biggest fan. He had some kind of interesting points that for him, it didn't really work out. And I thought maybe I would share this simply because it's always good to have an alternate opinion. So this is Bryce. Shout out Bryce for getting in touch. Always love hearing, opposite opinions to my own. So he says, questionable cons. It's offset of your tripod, so it takes some time to get used to, as we just discussed. Being on a ball head, it puts your face very low and close to the controls. So I would agree. I've had problems with ball heads before from that very reason. He seemed to experience more wind vibration, and he thinks it's because there's less area of the ARCA clamp touching the binos. One thing I will note is that Rydell did make this wider in this kind of second generation one that I have here. He says, I think the ARCA rail part seems to be slightly large on the wings, and so it fits in your head clamp not as good as I would like. So I addressed this earlier in that there is no perfectly agreed upon ARCA Swiss standardization. So every tripod head and every adapter, they can have little microscopic differences. For example, if you have a C-Ray VA5 and you try and use a normal ARCA adapter plate in there, you actually need to reverse out the opening screw several rotations. What I mean is, when you open that screw, you can only open it so many times and it stops. It like actually hits a piece of metal. What you need to do is then pull the kind of wing nut that's on the top of it out a little bit, and this will allow you to kind of reverse spin it and reseat it, and you'll keep getting more rotations out of it. And you can open that VA5 head much larger than it appears you can. Even if you want to use the Swaro ATX spotting scope that has a built-in ARCA attachment on the bottom, you need to do that movement with your VA5 in order to get it wide enough to accept that particular adapter. So I think that's more a function of the tripod pan head itself than it is of the actual adapter plate. This fit right in, no problem, in my Tracer, in my Wiser, in all my other pan heads that I have. Now, pros, he said, it does not move on my binos, holds super tight, fits in my harness, is super lightweight, easy to deploy, not gonna lose, and the price point is okay for what it is. Couple more thoughts. He said, I have used the post stud style and I have used multiple clamp style like the RRS cinch. I honestly like the cheap Vortex screw-in post with an extended screw so it's easier. And I would like to try out a Kramer design one at some point, though they get loose after a while off stud, so I hear. I personally haven't used the Kramer. So thanks, Bryce, for that feedback. Obviously, it's not perfect for everybody. What I kind of like is that something like this is so inexpensive, like just get one and try it out. If it doesn't work for your style, you can go back to whatever it is you used before. My buddy Ricky says, would it work better than the Outdoorsman's pin? I believe it works better than the Outdoorsman's pin. I think it's probably going to be a bit of a polarizing question, and I think you're going to get people on both sides of the fence. With my style of hunting and my style of glassing, I prefer this over the Outdoorsman's system. It's simpler, it's smaller, it's more lightweight, it requires less, disassembly and assembly. It's just a better system for me. All right, folks, that's it. That's all. Again, please stop by mindful-reviews.com. Join the community if you found this helpful in any way whatsoever. Also, if I could ask you to help spread the word about these reviews, I would greatly appreciate it. Like, comment, share, subscribe, post it to your IG stories. I'll reshare anything that I see. With the algorithms being what they are these days, any help I can get to kind of push this stuff up to the top of the feed is greatly appreciated. All right, so here's the deal. I want you to tell me in the comments section below what pair of binoculars you are currently running. If you have more than one pair, I want you to make separate comments because I have different size adapters for different binoculars. And I have 4 or 5 different ones that I can give away. So I'm going to pick one winner for each particular adapter. So I'm going to make sure that you win the one you need for your binoculars. So that's all you got to do. Like the video and in the comments section below, tell me which binos you run. All right, good luck. As always, if you have any additional questions or if I explained something that wasn't hyper clear and you want me to clarify, not a problem at all. Drop a note in the comments below and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. So until next time, thanks for tuning in.